Hello and welcome to Schlock Tactics, the movie podcast where we believe badder is better and aim to watch the terror-bad turds from cinema's cesspit so that you don't have to. My name is Ash and I'm joined once again by Mark. Oh, hi Mark.
Hello.
First of all, I just want to mention all the support we've received on social media and the fantastic response to our first episode that we released. It is still available if you want to go back and check it out. We did talk about some kaiju films from Korea, some real good Godzilla knockoffs from North Korea and South Korea, so we would say go back and check that out. But today, we will be talking about Clive Barker. Now, many of you may be familiar with Clive Barker for the iconic Hellraiser series, Candyman series, but everyone has to start somewhere, and Clive Barker definitely started with two quite unique films that we're going to talk about today, that being Underworld and Rawhead Rex. So first of all, we are going to start with a film called Underworld from 1985. Both of these films we're going to talk about today were directed by George Pavlou, and the screenplay was written by Clive Barker, and actually did have some fairly well-known actors, I suppose. Actually starred Ingrid Pitt, who was famous for the Hammer horror films in the 70s. Starred a guy called Steven Berkoff, who was in loads of Stanley Kubrick films, and also a guy called Larry Lamb, who you may know from EastEnders and Gavin and Stacey. But yes, the Underworld film we watched here. Mark, what were your first impressions of Underworld? Not the Kate Beckinsale film.
Very 80s. The 80s music definitely stood out.
Do you know who did the music for this film?
No. Enlighten me.
It was a band who were at the time called Freur.
Okay.
But they would later go on to name their band after this film and become Underworld. Very big dance group from the 90s who went on to record the music for the Trainspotting film. So probably the biggest impact that this film has had on popular culture was the band Underworld, who many people will probably remember from the 90s with their song Born Slippy.
Good bit of trivia.
Really, it's I think straight away in Underworld you get the feeling that this is going to be a bit of a double meaning. It's going to be the criminal underworld, but also some sort of horror element as well, I think was clear from the get-go. And we kind of start off with a couple of ninjas or people in balaclavas who are kind of roaming around London. I assume it's London, they don't really ever say, but everyone sort of talks like it's London and dresses like they're in London in the 80s. Straight away we find this sort of house. A guy is calling at this house asking for a particular girl. Straight away we see a house full of rich people up to no good.
Yeah.
I think people that Alan Partridge would call sex people. And they're up to no good in this brothel, I think, basically.
Yeah. I didn't know whether... when I first saw it, I thought they were like cultists or something, and it was obviously a brothel, but it was like, well, probably goes a bit darker than this in some way or another.
Well, with a film called Underworld, I think you're expecting some... from Clive Barker. Anyone going into it knowing Clive Barker will know there's going to be something a bit pervy.
Yeah.
Kinky about it, as a lot of his work does have that. But it was pretty much such a standard rich person brothel, and a high-class hooker in particular called Nicole, who seems to be one of the main characters here, and even gets her own theme song, if you notice that. There's a bit of an 80s power ballad kicks in with just someone going, "Oh, Nicole."
Yeah.
And I always like it when films have songs that are about the film, clearly been specially made for
one character.
Or one plot point. And that's what happens here. The lovely Nicole, high-class hooker. Unfortunately, some of these balaclava ninjas sneak into the room and start making trouble, start getting a bit pervy and a bit rapey with her. They start feeling her up, and this causes Ricardo to bust in and start struggling. Now, Ricardo, the character, he was a butler, maybe a bodyguard, a pimp. I'm not quite sure what his role was, but he was certainly called upon to defend against the balaclava ninjas.
And then the guy turns into some kind of, like, beast.
Yeah, well, I think all the while you're wondering, well, what are... Initially you just think they're thugs and balaclavas, but they make all these weird noises, so you're thinking it's maybe some kind of monster. And then when the hoods do get taken off, he kind of looks like a grandma. Like a really angry grandma. Or because of the hair, I thought it was sort of maybe a member of Duran Duran on a kind of coke-fueled rampage through London, which probably happened quite a lot in 1985. I mean, very awkwardly, we slam from this scene right into our Larry Lamb character doing a bit of what I would call sexy painting in his apartment the next day. And it's a very harsh cut, isn't it, from a scene of peril and monsters to Larry Lamb doing a bit of painting by the riverside.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's in the middle of painting then when some kind of gangsters turn up, some quite foppish gangsters. One of them I think was called Fluke, and the other one was just referred to as Darling by many of the characters in the film. I'm not sure why, but they turn up and basically it becomes clear that Larry Lamb is a reformed gangster who's now on the straight and narrow. He just wants to paint to sexy saxophone music, and he doesn't want to do any more crime or hitman jobs, whatever it was he was doing. But they say, well, you have to, because Nicole has been kidnapped by some weirdos in balaclavas. Some beasts have broken in and kidnapped Nicole, and they need to take him to Motherskill. I think that was right. I had to check it because they said it so many times, but it's a very strange name.
I think it was Motherskill.
So they take Larry Lamb. His character's called Roy, and I should really refer to him as Roy, but I like the alliteration of Larry Lamb. But Roy gets taken to see Motherskill on a kind of a
boat.
Kind of a boat. It is a boat. But on a boat, and he sort of stands on the front of the boat. And once again, I'm reminded of Duran Duran and like the Rio video where he's kind of like standing on the front. So he's standing on the front of this boat in kind of like a leather jacket and rolled up sleeves, trying to look hard. I thought throughout this film, Larry Lamb was just trying to look as hard as possible when his character is called Roy.
He just really wanted to be in a 80s music video. Yeah.
I don't think... Yeah... Larry Lamb was definitely not aware that he was in a horror film. He was in a gangster film and a hard man East End crime film, and that's what he was going to stick to, really. But he is taken to see Motherskill. This is played by the actor Steven Berkoff, who he actually was a Bond villain in Octopussy, and I think they must have seen that because in this film he sort of is a Bond villain as well. He's sitting in his sort of luxury office. Looks a bit like Kingpin from Spider-Man as well. He's sort of smoking a cigar. There's a lot of smoking in this film, actually.
Yeah.
Probably more smoking than I've seen in any film recently, I guess.
Excessive smoking.
It was an 80s feature, wasn't it? Smoking constantly. People always had cigars, people always had cigarettes, and in this film I did have a lot of smoking. But Motherskill, the crime boss, basically, he says, Nicole has been kidnapped by these weirdos, and he said they were going to make a snuff film with her or something. They were going to cut her up and film it. I don't know how he knows all of this.
Yeah.
But that was the idea, and of course Roy is not up for it. He's out of the game now. He's gone straight and narrow. It is Roy's love for Nicole that gets him involved, and he agrees to track down Nicole and Nicole's kidnappers.
Motherskill says he has knowledge, talent, motivation.
Oh, okay.
3 words that he used.
That's his summation of Roy.
Yeah.
Well, he did like to paint. That shows him kind of a sensitive, hard man there, I guess. So we are taken to the brothel then. The madame of the brothel is called Pepperdine, and she is played by Ingrid Pitt. She sort of gives Roy information about Nicole, but mostly she laughs at Ricardo because he's in a neck brace.
She goes, poor baby, and then starts laughing.
I felt really sorry for this guy. He was in a neck brace and still having to like pour her drinks and be like a butler, like a manservant. And she was just constantly saying poor baby and like laughing her head off. There was a lot of laughing in this scene.
Yeah.
I thought in it straight away, I thought she was off her tits on drugs. And then Roy asks her, was Nicole on drugs? And she says, well, everyone's on drugs, dear. I was like, oh, okay, that explains A, why everyone's laughing their heads off, and B, why everyone's always smoking.
Yeah.
It's a drug town that we're in here. And there's also a prostitute called Bianca, as Roy pronounces it.
Oh, yeah.
Bianca, the prostitute who does offer Roy a freebie on more than one occasion, because he's quite a hunk, he's quite a hard man. So he gets offered some free, genuine free sex from a prostitute, which he turns down because he's in love with Nicole, I guess. But she does point him in the direction of Dr. Savary. The pronunciation of this changed from character to character. Savary. I guess Savary is just savoury in French, maybe.
Yeah.
And she says that he's the one that's filling these hookers full of drugs. That's probably something to do with why she was kidnapped. Does end up in an 80s cocktail bar with the guy that was referred to as Darling earlier. Roy has found along the way this, what looks like a tiny bottle of milk, which he decides is some sort of new deadly drug that is killing prostitutes or getting rid of prostitutes. And the guy's like, well, put that away. Put away the tiny bottle of milk. You can't take that out in a very cheesy 80s cocktail bar. So Roy does eventually find Dr. Savary. What I liked about this part was the intercom for Dr. Savary's house was coming up on his home computer, which looked like a Spectrum or Amstrad or something of the day. From ringing the bell outside, your likeness appeared on a computer inside, which had ridiculous 80s kind of graphics on the screen. And he was able to press some buttons on his computer and scan Roy, which ended up showing significant metal detected.
Yeah.
And sort of a Predator-style heat map showing that he had some sort of gun in his breast pocket.
Couldn't tell you what type of metal, just that it was significant.
Well, yeah, significant metal detected is quite a good review, I think.
Yeah.
But he was also able to scan his ID. He ran several scans of his face to see if he was recognised. Not known to him as a known criminal, so I guess Roy obviously had been straight for quite a while. I sort of thought this was exactly the same house as the brothel. I don't know whether it was meant to be the same house or they were just filming in the same house and were trying to pass it off as the same house.
Not sure. He came in and he said, "I'm looking for a girl." And the guy said, Savary said, "I'm a doctor, not a pimp."
Yeah. Not a pimp. Clearly not a pimp. Which I think Roy knew anyway, but he did have the little milk bottle with him. And he said, what is this? What's in this then? And I think the doorbell rings, so Dr. Savary has to go. And before he goes, he says, "Don't touch anything." And as soon as he leaves the room, Roy pretty much touches everything in the room that he can find. And eventually, I think we find this as a little fridge or something with lots of tiny little milk bottles. Again, linking everyone in the film is these little tiny bottles of milk, which are, we're told by a character earlier, is pure sort of ecstasy. It'll blow your head off. Like, you've never had anything like this before. It's the best drug ever, I suppose.
Yeah.
And then we end up back with Nicole, and all of a sudden, just like that, we are in the Underworld, and there's been no build-up to this, but she just wakes up underground, and she's confronted by several kind of
deformed,
lumpy-headed people. One of them calls himself Shitface.
Yeah.
Legitimately, that's not our opinion of him. He called himself Shitface.
Someone referred to him as Doo-Doo, I think. And then he responded, smiling, going, "All my friends call me Shitface."
Well, if your friends call you Shitface, I don't know what your enemies will call you.
I think it was Doo-Doo or some other
Doo-Doo.
silly name for...
Yeah, there's several characters here with... One of them's got quite good makeup and is quite lumpy, but a lot of them, if they were meant to be mutants or deformed, they really hadn't put much effort into the makeup because...
No.
Some of them just had like a scab on their chin.
Yeah, some of them had like quite deformed faces, and then one or two you thought they just have the vaguest scar on their cheek or something.
Yeah, it was very half-assed, the makeup in this.
Yeah.
I don't know whether we were trying to go with like an Isle of Dr. Moreau vibe, where some of them were half animal, half man. They certainly mentioned one of them was on the loose, and it was a kind of a beast. And I think this is the one from earlier with the crazy granny screaming. That was the sort of Lion-O from Thundercats. He looked a bit like him, but nowhere near as good looking makeup wise. But so we're introduced all of a sudden to the monsters in this monster movie, which underwhelm pretty much straight away. They're just people with a couple of spots, maybe a bit of overactive facial hair. Not what I would call mutants by any stretch of the imagination. I've seen worse just on the streets of England. Walking down the street, I've seen worse than that. So
they were very unthreatening and very unmutated.
Yeah. So Bianca the prostitute does pop up again. She goes to visit Roy, to try and help him. She's scared. I think maybe she's being stalked by these beast people, mutant people. They're kind of closing in on her. His apartment I quite liked. He had lots of leather chairs, lots of neon lights. It looked like he had a one-armed bandit by his front door, and that's where he kept his gun. He kept his revolver in the sort of trough of a fruit machine.
Yeah.
And that was quite weird. But yeah, very nice 80s apartment here. But whilst Bianca is staying with Roy, unfortunately this lion man, beast man, breaks in and tries to abduct her, just like he abducted Nicole. Her self-defense is to throw a duvet on top of him. It works exceptionally well. He flails about for a while, covered in a thick 80s print duvet. And all the while, Roy is sort of busted in, and they have a pretty good fight scene, Roy and this beast man. Someone gets grabbed by the balls, I can't remember who, but there's definitely some nut grabbing. I think Roy, being the hard man he is, grabs the guy by the balls and tries to sort of chuck him out the window.
And then once Roy kills him, some other beast comes out of the ground or something. Drags him underground and then disappears. The
idea that they can enter our world from any point.
Yeah.
If they want to. So yeah, the guy comes out of the sewers basically and retrieves the other beast man and takes him away, and that's when Roy first realises that there's a world beyond our world.
Yeah.
About 5 foot under the pavement. It's called the sewers, as far as I could see. It was just the sewers, but that was their underworld that they refer to in the title. We do have a very another very awkward slam kind of cut to some kind of kinky interpretive dance in a strip club. With a couple of people look like they were in Mad Max.
Yeah.
And the guy presenting it just said, "Oh, well, I know this is a bit kinky, but this is what people are into these days." There's a cameo here, actually. The bartender that's talking to Motherskill and telling him about the dancers is an actor called Sean Chapman, who would go on to be Uncle Frank in the Hellraiser film. So this was his first introduction, I guess, to Clive Barker. Very, very small part as a bartender with sunglasses on, inside sunglasses on, and that was his little appearance in this. Roy comes to the strip club while the interpretive dance is going on. I think the interpretive dance is stopped by that point because Motherskill tells the guy, "You're going to have a new career when I throw you out of the exit door." Something very clunky and rubbish like that. He's quite unintimidating, this gangster boss, I have to say.
Yeah.
But Roy confronts him about the mutants and the drugs from Savary, and obviously Roy suspects that Motherskill knows quite a bit more than he's letting on. Motherskill's response to these accusations is just very loudly saying, "No, no, no." And that was it. I thought at one point he said, "I swear on my kid's Isa," but
I didn't pick that up.
That can't possibly be what he said. But, and then Roy sort of threatens him with a syringe and just like, if this is meant to be your villain, this gang boss, he's really not very intimidating. The hero straight away gets the better of him, threatens him with a syringe.
Yeah.
And he looks like a wimp, really. He's like, if he's meant to be the gang lord of London.
He was overthrown very easily within a short space of time in that scene. Kind of there like trying not to get injected.
And then Roy leaves, and then we got some great Cockney swearing, calling him a dirty bastard and a ponce, which is great.
Typical kind of British insult.
Yeah. Roy logs on to this computer again, this Spectrum, and he finds these tapes of heroin addicts strapped to chairs that are going through various states of experimentation by Dr. Savary. One
of the things I found the most interesting about the film, I suppose, I found that part quite interesting, where it's kind of this person exposed to this drug, and then Roy goes in and discovers these tapes. Again,
the makeup's not very impressive. The guy comes into the light and he's got some pudding on his face or something like that. But that is to indicate that the mutant people have been kind of exploited. These are people from the streets, heroin addicts and prostitutes that have been kind of exploited and experimented on by this Savary guy, and that's the kind of revelation that you get here towards the end. But this all kind of leads to Roy discovering the quote-unquote underworld underneath the house of Dr. Savary. So it's all these mutants here. Nicole feels like she's one of them because it's not really touched upon too much, but this is not just any high-class hooker. She has superpowers in which she can make your dreams a reality, and not just in a sexy prostitute way. It's said several times as though it's a literal whatever you dream I can make happen.
Yeah,
and this isn't really followed up on.
No.
I don't really know what they were on about, but that's why she feels that she's a mutant as well, because she has the special ability to make people's dreams come true, although it doesn't really happen. The only time we ever see this sort of happen is when Dr. Savory confronts her, and she says, I can make dreams come true, and I'm going to make your dreams come true. And he's like, oh no, don't do that. And we're thinking, maybe he's really a perv, like maybe he's got some really pervy fantasies in that. And then she looks at him with these glowing eyes, and then he rips his own face off and spontaneously combusts.
Yeah.
So if that was his dream, then that's what's happened.
His face just starts melting.
His face peeled off and he spontaneously combusts. So is that what maybe it meant not necessarily your fantasies and your dreams, maybe your worst nightmares and stuff like that. But it was very lightly touched upon, to the point where, who knows, they didn't give this any effort, so why should we
take what you want from that scene?
Yeah, so that was the end of Dr. Savory, and maybe some sort of poetic justice, it's hard to say. They were certainly intended. And then the gangsters end up storming the freak compound. Guns, bombs, fire, the works.
Some big shootout inside the building and outside the building. They're kind of one group on one side, one on the other, kind of thing.
It's a kind of a crime, what you would expect in a crime film, some sort of shootout.
Yeah.
There are people, I'm sure there's a Wilhelm scream here. One of the mutants kind of falls out of a window, and I'm sure we get a little Wilhelm scream, which would be amazing. All the while, Roy is escaped from the underground and is now outside again, and is attacking the gangsters outside so that he can get back inside. The geography of where Roy was at this time was very confusing.
There seems to be quite unspecific boundary between the underworld and the real world. Like, it seems to be quite easy to jump between the two.
I think you could just open a hatch in the floor and then you're in. Or you're out. I mean, if this is meant to be a proper underworld, it's very easily accessible.
Yeah.
Like I say, I think it was just the sewer system of London.
Someone was just in the basement.
It was very lazy, set-wise. They didn't have much money, I'm sure. There was a good bit where Roy, in some sort of terrible stealth mode, sneaks up on a guy with a flaming bit of wood in his hand and sets fire to the back of his knee.
Oh yeah. Before then smacking him over the head or something.
Yeah.
I think he was just trying to make the guy look around or look down before then launching at his head.
I don't think he does stealth very well.
No.
That was quite funny.
Made me laugh.
And we so basically there's a confrontation between the gangsters versus mutants, which would probably have been a better name for this film. Yeah, then Nicole decides that she would like to go off. Possibly, I think she goes off with Shitface, if I remember rightly. Ironically, he didn't really stick in my mind visually, even though he was called Shitface. She decides to wander off with him, and then we get probably one of my favourite bits of the film again, where Roy comes out with his hatch in the ground and does a slow motion walk away from a sunset with 80s music blaring, and then we get a freeze frame at the end. And there you go. That was Underworld. Clive Barker's first job as a screenwriter, based on one of his short stories, but he wasn't that impressed with the end result. What did you think overall, Mark, about Underworld?
I thought it had some interesting themes, interesting ideas. I quite liked the whole crazy doctor who makes an addictive drug and does all these kind of experiments on, exploits these addicts. It's quite interesting kind of sort of ideas, but I found a lot of the film, there were points where it just dragged and things weren't explained very well. There were parts where things were just left quite unexplained, and that made it drag more because you thought, I thought I was going somewhere, and then they didn't really wrap it up or sort of tell you explicitly what happened. So there's points where I thought, this is bordering on being quite gripping, and then and then just
being very kind,
and then just sort of failing completely.
I think a lot of it didn't go anywhere. Like you say, there were many plot points that didn't go anywhere. Yeah, this was mostly just a crime, East End London crime film that happened to have some monsters in it because it was written by Clive Barker and there was some horror elements to it. But I think a bit of a wasted opportunity with the characters, the mutant underground characters. I wanted to know a lot more about them. We found out where they came from, but what do they do now?
Yeah.
They just live underground, and what are they doing down there? What's their goal? What do they want to do?
What are their motives?
Yeah. I don't know what it was doing. And this was an idea, really, that would be done to much more effect by Clive Barker when his cult 90s film called Nightbreed came out, and that was very much the idea of a world underneath our world, where all these different mutants and superheroes kind of live. So really this was a kind of a rough go of that, a rough draft of what would become Nightbreed and the Nightbreed Chronicles, which is a much better film than this film. Like you say, this dragged like hell. It didn't really go anywhere. Had some alright actors in it, I suppose. Had a lot of overacting, and there was just not much point to the film.
Did make me laugh though.
It made me laugh a few times. Yeah. It was soaked in 80s. That was quite fun.
Some good lines.
And there was some quite good lines, some quite good Cockney gangster dialogue, if you like, that sort of thing. But other than the character of Rory rescuing the character of Nicole, I didn't know what the point of anything else was.
No.
Everything else was diversion, just to make a 90-minute film. I'm assuming it's 90 minutes. It felt longer, but
it did feel longer. The plot points were blurry, and it was just drawn out and sometimes just a bit boring in places because I couldn't follow it. But it did make me laugh.
Yeah, so that is Underworld. Like I say, the first film that Clive Barker ever wrote. You can go check that out if you wish. Wouldn't really recommend that you do that, but we've done it for you, so not to worry. The next film that we're going to talk about now then is the 1986 film called Rawhead Rex. Essentially about a 9-foot phallus on the loose. Not my words, but the words of Clive Barker, who once again wrote the screenplay for this film based on his own short story, and once again he was not very happy with the outcome and would lead very directly to him demanding to direct the next film he would make, which was Hellraiser. But Rawhead Rex was certainly another learning process for Clive Barker, and it is based on the short story of the same name. Straight away, I want to give a shout out to Bristol Bad Film Club. We went to watch this being shown in a crypt in Bristol here, where we are, and it was awesome in that setting. So if you live anywhere near Bristol and you want to come and watch a bad film, or just find a good source for bad films, check out the Bristol Bad Film Club. And if you live in a city that's not as good as Bristol, you can still watch it. I think Arrow Video have just released it on Blu-ray, so you can obtain it that way and have a laugh at it as well. Mark, what were your first impressions of this wonderful film?
Well, I wasn't expecting an Irish countryside setting, to be honest.
You know who else wasn't expecting it to be set in Ireland? Clive Barker.
No?
Because he wrote the story set in England in the height of summer. This was set in Ireland in the dead of winter, so you weren't the only one surprised by the setting.
Okay,
here.
good. I thought my opinions may have sounded stupid.
But this is weirdly set in the Irish countryside. I mean, I guess Clive Barker is of Irish descent. He's actually a Scouser. This again was directed by George Pavlou, who directed Underworld that we just talked about. Part of a sort of a two film deal really that Clive Barker did, and then immediately regretted selling the rights to both of these stories here to be made into films. Yeah, it is set in the Irish countryside, and it is based around an American writer that visits Ireland to write a book about sacred pagan sites all across Ireland and holy sites from a bygone, very bygone era.
Yeah, he said he's looking for Neolithic sites.
Yes, very old then, yeah. He brings his family along with him, which is kind of a very cliched nagging wife and bratty kids, who are quite amusing. We do get straight into it, as you say, with some Irish farmers find a monolithic kind of penis again.
Yeah. The
story was just all about penises, so it comes up in the film a lot.
Phallic symbols everywhere.
Oh, phallus is up to your eyeballs in this film. But this giant stone penis is there, like Stonehenge, but stone penis. And I mean, I don't want to generalise, but Irish accents are pretty funny, and especially in this film.
Yeah.
I can say that I'm from Irish stock as well.
I enjoyed the accents.
Straight away you get a guy saying, I got to get home for me tea, or something like that. Just straight away some real funny Irish accents in the countryside there, and they leave this guy out in the countryside with this giant stone penis. And unfortunately, immediately a thunderstorm starts up, and lightning strikes a giant stone cock, and Rawhead Rex, pretty early onto the film, he just kind of shoots up from the ground like he's been fired out of a cannon at the centre of the earth. He just shoots out of the ground, and you get your very first look at the character. What did you think of the look of this character? Was this something you were expecting as well, or surprised by?
Yeah, it's pretty cool, actually. Kind of like a superhuman, slightly taller with this kind of...
Yeah, there's a massive looking thing, isn't it? A massive looking monster.
This kind of massive wolf-like jaw.
Yeah.
Massive teeth, obviously.
Yeah.
Which become a feature.
I think they had good intentions with the design of the character, I think. Yeah. Maybe it didn't come out quite as well as it should have.
The lightning, by the way, looked shit. I just want to make that point.
I think all the effects in this film are shit, but we'll get to that. Whilst Rex is being ejected from the Earth's core, we're introduced to our priest assistant. They call him something. Declan, this guy Declan, and he's standing there. At various points in the film, we just get shots of him from above where he's looking up near the camera, just screaming or just throwing his arms up in the air, being very religious, maybe. The altar, he puts his hand on it and it burns his hand, so straight away we know something weird has happened. And then straight away you see the window in the church, which has the likeness of Rawhead Rex on it. Straight away, that looked better than the creature effects that we just saw. The crude stained glass window looked way better, and that's our first clue that obviously this character has been known about in religious circles. Prior to being born again here in this lightning storm. We do then get obviously Rex, as you would imagine, starts going on a rampage of the Irish countryside, and he goes to hide in somebody's barn, as you would probably expect as well. And then when he's discovered in the barn by this character called Dennis, he mauls him, and again we get a great close up of the head of this creature. Yeah. Which just looks awful. Glowing red eyes, so you can sort of see the LEDs. The jaws, like you say, quite impressive, but they're animatronics. It's an animatronic head in close-ups. And I think of a much cruder rubber head in faraway shots. But the close-up animatronic head, still not really good enough to be in a close-up. It's gnashing and zany sort of red eyes.
Brilliantly terrible.
Yeah, it's what we want to see. Yeah. It's what our listeners want to see, I'm sure. But it's bloody awful. What most amused me about this part was after he mauls Dennis, he breaks into the house where Dennis's pregnant wife is there cooking, making a good old Irish stew, and she locks herself in another room, so Rex just smashes the shit out of the kitchen. Yeah. And that sounds like he's just like throwing over the table. No, he was specifically targeting foods. he sort of kicks over some eggs. He smashes the counter and loads of spaghetti sticks fall onto the floor. So I don't know whether Rawhead Rex had something against the food in this kitchen. Dennis and his wife aren't going to be having any spaghetti carbonara for a while by the looks of it, because Rex just wreaked havoc on this kitchen, and it was just a close-up of the spaghetti strands slowly sliding out of the pack and falling onto the floor. I was like, where are your priorities here? Why? Nobody cares about spaghetti. Dried spaghetti, cooked spaghetti maybe.
Meanwhile, the wife sort of goes a bit mad, obviously, screaming. Losing it because her husband just died, obviously.
And she's pregnant and vulnerable. Yeah. But we discover that Rawhead Rex isn't interested in pregnant women. He doesn't want to kill them. He spares her. Yeah. And she just goes mad instead. So there's the idea that something to do with fertility. I think the American writer does go to visit the priest and ask about some of the pre-Christian sites in the area, and there is some mention about paganism and ancient fertility cults and stuff like that. So you start to see the connection, however clumsy it might be, between Rawhead Rex and the kind of ancient pagan beliefs in I guess in that part of the world.
From there, the detectives get involved.
Yeah, we get our introduction to the detectives, and one detective in particular has definitely gone for quite a noir look. He turns up in the rain with like a fedora on, smoking a cigar.
Yeah.
I can't remember whether he was Irish or not, but he certainly wasn't cool enough to be dressed like that and looking like that. But he was the detective inspector for the local area. And so we get the police involvement into this, and they start looking into this monster that's started to kill people there. Apparently there'd never been a murder in that town.
No.
That was the idea. So people don't know what to think. There's never been a murder ever in this town in Ireland. You will also notice in this film some really awkward sex scenes and kissing scenes quite a lot. We cut to the American writer and his wife just walking down the street, and they're making innuendos all the way, and they just start like necking on the street, and
really over the top
porno necking in the street, and then an old woman just comes into shot on the bottom right hand corner, and you can't figure out whether she's meant to be in this shot or she's just someone who was around when they were filming, but she just stands there until they stop necking, and then she can walk through them. But it was so weird.
And she looks back at them as well with this really evil look.
Yeah,
back at them afterwards.
So I'm assuming,
and you think
she was meant to be.
Why
in the
does
film.
she hate them that much?
I'm not convinced she was meant to be in the film, but she was in it anyway. She looked a bit like the character from Don't Look Now with the red coat. Yeah. And I thought maybe this was the beginning of an indication that the people in the town are sort of in on this cult. Like you say, the weird look. I was like, ooh. Yeah. She gave them a weird look because they were kissing in the street. Does that mean she's maybe part of some sort of like Hot Fuzz type little village cult, you know?
And they all feel the same way about these kind of people,
And then we immediately cut from this to a caravan park, which actually a lot of the film is set in this caravan park. We get more people necking. There's a young guy and a young girl necking on the sofa with a small child sitting on the opposite sofa. He's just messing about, playing with his toys, and I think it must be his older brother saying, "Can you cut it out? I'm trying to have sex with this woman here. What you do? Do you mind keeping it down?" And it's very very weird angle that they're going for there. Little Neil, he's called. The younger brother is called Little Neil.
Later on, that couple go into the woods.
Yeah.
And then Rex comes along.
Yeah.
Start running away.
Yeah, they go into the woods. Well, he takes his girlfriend into the woods so that he can have sex with her. She changes her mind once they get to the woods. He doesn't seem to care. Just getting rapey in the woods. Oh, come on, and she's like, no, I don't think so. He doesn't care. So luckily at this point, Rex turns up and starts chasing them through. A really funny scene which just... The crowd went wild in our screening, but she runs away while holding the hand of her boyfriend.
Doesn't realise.
Doesn't realise.
But the thing is, you don't realise either because you can't see his body, and then it sort of zooms out slightly. You just see that the hand is just disembodied.
I mean, if this was a comedy film, you would say that was masterful. Yeah. It's not a comedy film.
No.
It's meant to be scary.
She just starts screaming.
She just gets back to the trailer park with her boyfriend's hand, and only his hand. The rest of him is being eaten in the woods by Rex, and it was just amazing. Like the fact they ever thought that could be scary. That's got to be funny. That's got to be slapstick. And people wet themselves in the screening that I was in. It was amazing. Rex is spotted shortly after this by the American writer. He's gone out for some air. I think his wife wanted sex again. That was what it was. So he went out for some air.
Yeah.
His wife's gone sex mad. So he goes out for some air, which I think is code for a fag. He looks up at the hillside, and Rex is standing there with the severed head of this guy, the guy that just had a hand off, and just into the night. And that's when the first time that the writer starts to become aware of Rawhead Rex.
Yeah.
And he should know more about this monster because he studied pagan and Neolithic monsters and cults in the area. So that's when the trail really hots up.
He tells the police that he saw a monster and it was not human. And not the police, the detectives. they don't believe him, and
Yeah.
he's getting stressed out about it.
And then he tries to go to the priest Declan at the church with his Polaroid camera, taking some pictures of the stained glass window.
Yeah.
And the priest knocks the camera to the floor and just stamps on it.
Yeah, he's like, get the fuck out of here.
He just overreacts massively.
Yeah.
Get the fuck out of this church. He's like, what? What's wrong with you? And then that's when we start to realise that Declan has kind of been possessed and corrupted by Rex as well. So the writer does decide to get the fuck out of town. And this was a great scene. They leave town in their car. On the way out of town, his little daughter says she needs the toilet. So they park it by the side of the road, and they basically just say, go on then, there's a field there. And you're just thinking, there's murders happening. There's a monster on the loose. There are people being murdered. You know this. And they're just... Her mum doesn't care. She's like, oh, go in that field. And then the dad's like, oh, all right, I guess I'll take it. So he takes her in this field and
leave the son behind on his own.
Leaves the son behind. The mum comes out of the... So basically all of the family are out in this field because the daughter goes behind a bush to have a piss. And obviously you're meant to think that Rex is going to be behind the bush.
Yeah.
But then there's actually some sort of dead rabbit.
Yeah.
So the dad and the mum and the girl are all behind this bush. A really funny sequence where the dad, you get this really far away shot of the bush with the dad's head, and he's looking back at the car, and his son's in the car reading a comic, no problem. Then he bends down to look at the rabbit again, stands back up. Oh, he's in the car reading a comic, no problem. Again, they repeat this 2 or 3 times, and then all of a sudden he looks up and Rex is just reaching into the car, grabbing his son, and I felt sorry for this actor. He has to run to this gate and pretend that he can't open it and he can't fit through this gate that he just went through. Yeah. While his son is being eaten by Rawhead Rex. And as soon as Rex runs off, he opens the gate, no problem. And this poor sod, this actor, had to pretend that he couldn't open this gate until it was too late. Yeah.
Nothing about that scene made sense at all.
It was ridiculous. I was just very surprised that this is the child of the protagonist who's been eaten.
Yeah.
And you think, oh, maybe he'll be taken away and he'll come back. No. He's been eaten. That's it.
Yeah.
It's over. And you think, Jesus, that's quite a bold decision to kill a child. Sort of halfway through the film.
Yeah.
It's quite unbelievable. But this, of course, gives the writer the motive to stay and to sort this out and to look into this further.
Yeah, he's right. I'm going to take a stand now.
He starts to fly off the handle at the police. My son's just been eaten. What are you doing about it? And they're like, oh, I'm very sorry about that. It's also at this point that he visits the police inspector and he's trying to describe Rawhead Rex to him. And then another policeman comes in and goes, well, we've just received a sketch from little Neil from the trailer park, who's now in some sort of mental hospital because he's traumatised. And they show this sketch of Rawhead Rex to the policeman. And I honestly thought this was maybe some early concept art for the character because it looks so shit. But then so does the monster. So you can't say it's wrong. And then later on, the American writer also does a sketch of it, and it's even worse than the small child who's got PTSD and is in hospital.
So I just found it funny how he's shouting at them, trying to convince them that there's a monster out there, and they don't believe him. Yeah. As soon as they show him this terrible drawing, they're like, oh, wait, now we definitely believe it.
Well, this looks
if a kid drew it.
They see an awful sketch by a mentally disturbed child, and that's when they start to get worried that there's something seriously wrong here. It's just weird. But all the while, the writer keeps going back to the church to try and figure out, because he knows it's something to do with the church, something to do with religion, pre-Christian religious kind of myths and legends. And he ends up working out that the stained glass window is kind of got a piece missing.
Yeah.
And it's in one of the other windows, and they need to basically put them back together again to figure out how to defeat Rex. And then he also figures out that the thing needed to kill Rex is in the altar, which everyone keeps burning their hands on.
Yeah.
Everyone keeps trying to open it, and it just glows bright red, which is a shit.
Again, terrible effect.
A really shit effect.
Yeah.
It burns their hand and they just swear. That's usually what happens. So this all culminates basically in Rex making his final assault on the church. This leads to easily the most remarkable scene in the film. So unbelievable and so shocking that none of the people in the screening we were at even really noticed what was happening. Declan the priest kneels in front of Rawhead Rex, and Rex starts to piss all over him. It sounds like we're making this up. It happened. And I think everyone in the screening was just really confused. You'd think that would get a big laugh at the screening, but people were just, what is he doing? Is he pissing? Is he pissing on a priest? I mean, I don't think I've seen that in any other film. If Rawhead Rex has any claim, it's that there was a film where a monster pissed on a priest. And I guess the idea was he would be baptised in a very sacrilegious way.
Yeah.
But I don't know what you thought of... what did you think of the Rex pissing on the priest?
I was just confused, like you said. I didn't know what to make of it.
It was more unbelievable than funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the thing. It should have been the funniest bit in the film, but it was just weird.
Yeah.
And I just didn't quite understand what that meant.
No.
But yeah, all of the Irish SWAT teams descend on this church, and things really escalate at this point. Most of the people there are on fire. I don't know why, but they are. An American writer finds it's a statue of a woman. This is the relic that can defeat Rawhead Rex because it's a fertility thing, and he tries to make it work, but he can't, and he realises that's because it needs to be a woman that holds it and activates it. So this is, for a very confusing and terrible film, a very feminist film, because it states that the monster can only be defeated by a woman, and that a woman will save the world according to this weird pagan religion here. So it's only when his wife gets her hands on this little statue of a woman that she activates what I can only describe as a womb laser, because the statue does have a womb, does have an opening, and out of it comes this blue laser. Terrible video sort of drawn on effects. This womb laser it's just targeting Rex. He's going mental. It's draining all of the life from him, and then it ends up completely draining him of all his essence, and we see just this sort of charred husk left. And you know what? I actually thought that looked better than the creature effects for the rest of the film. So most of this film was me just looking at things that weren't the creature design and thinking that would have even that would have been better.
Yeah.
That's why this is such a funny film and such a bad film. The failure or success, but certainly the failure at the time of this film were the creature effects.
Yeah.
I mean, there was some hammy acting, very over the top acting, particularly from Declan the priest. Just 1 minute he'll be fine, and the next minute he'll be calling people fuckface and knobhead. You call someone a knobhead or a dickhead. You don't hear that very often in films.
And then what happens right at the end? Rex wakes from the grave.
Oh, of course. No 80s horror film would be complete if the monster didn't come back at the very, very end of the film. But yeah.
So I started Googling Rawhead Rex 2.
Oh, yeah? How did you get on with that?
Nothing.
Funnily enough, I read an interview with Clive Barker around the time. He was actually interviewed after they'd made the film, but before it came out. And he said, quote, "I don't believe urinating on Vickers will stay." How wrong he was. It's just madness that scene ever happened. He was probably taking the piss. Just thought, I'll write something ludicrously blasphemous and ridiculous, and it stayed in. And immediately disowned this film after it came out. The creature effects, like I say, were the main culprit in what makes this film bad or good. Yeah, what were your overall impressions of Rawhead Rex?
Yeah, I found it very entertaining.
Yeah, this is the better bad movie, for sure. Even though Clive Barker disowned both of these, at least Rawhead Rex was so bad that it was good and it was funny.
Yeah.
And original, I would say. Not many horror films are set in Ireland. Not many horror films have a pagan prehistoric demon. Shitty effects aside, it is kind of a unique idea. And without Rawhead Rex, we wouldn't have got Hellraiser the following year. Clive Barker said, I've got a story here that I want to adapt, and there's no way I'm letting George Pavlou at it again. So he directed it himself, and the rest is history there. So yeah.
I found it interesting that throughout the film they kind of referred to Rex's motives. So not towards the beginning, but sort of not too far in, the detective suspects it's a revenge killing, and you kind of think, what would it be revenge for?
Revenge for what?
Yeah.
Building
and
civilization.
Yeah. Later on, they go on to talk about how they thought they'd disrupted his land or something, his kind of territory.
Oh, yeah.
And then towards the end, you realise that, quotes from the crazy guy, he's like, he wants to baptize you, he is God, he was king here.
Yeah, that's a cool idea.
So it kind of gives you this more and more kind of background to him, I suppose.
Yeah.
It doesn't really place him there for any reason, but it's kind of peppered throughout the film that these.
I think they were going for a real they were trying for a real kind of commentary about religion. I'm sure, I haven't read the short story, but I'm sure that is a point much better made in the story, than comes across in such a ridiculous film. They did have a point to make about religion, or the fact that Rex was here before you and before Christ and before all of you. He was the king, and legends, the devil had to be based on someone, they say at one point, don't they? And that would have been Rex. I like the idea of Christian ideas being based on things much older than them, and that was what they were trying to get across. But with a monster that looks like this, it's just never going to be taken seriously. But yeah, no, I agree with you. Rawhead Rex, much worse and much better film than Underworld. It's what it does bad, it does much better. Yeah,
it was more entertaining.
It's very good fun, very original, and I would recommend that for everyone to check out. Rawhead Rex. If you liked either of these films, obviously there's a lot of Clive Barker stuff to get into. Hellraiser, we mentioned a few times there. Candyman, Nightbreed, very similar to the plot of Underworld, but a much better film. And a film from the mid-90s called Lord of Illusions, which is very good as well. But I must warn you, all those films are good films. Not bad films, so you've been warned. You may enjoy them genuinely. That has been another episode of Schlock Tactics. If you want to subscribe, that would be great, and leave us a review on iTunes. We would also appreciate that. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at Schlock Tactics. Please get in touch with us. Let us know if you have seen either of these films, what you think of them. If you have any questions for us, if you want to suggest any other films for us to review, we'd be happy to do that. But that has been another episode of Schlock Tactics. I've been Ash, and I've been joined by Mark.
Yeah, guys, thanks for listening, guys. Been good.
And we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.